Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. How's everybody doing out there? Magandango Maga, Akim Maga Kabagan, Kamusta, Mariming Salamat for coming by and checking out my video. For all of my people that are in Azerbaijan, salam to you. And let me see, I just learned this, Kak Sagol. Thank you for coming by and checking out my video. And as always with my languages, feel free if I do slightly mess up saying something, let me know what the proper pronunciation for it is, and then that way I can say it correctly, because that's the only way I'm going to get better at learning the languages. Because, as you guys know, English is my native language. So every single other language that I speak other than English is a foreign language to me. But I do try. So I appreciate it very much, guys. And I have a game for you now, and it is taken from the last knockout let me just check here. The last knockout, so it's taken from round 5 of the knockout that, Teimour Radjabov and Wesley So played with each other. And so, this determined who is going to be going into the final round. And as you guys probably already know, Wesley So did win that. So this is one of the games from that. So this is the game. This is round 5, and this is game number 3 between them. And it's pretty nice. It has kind of like an in-game concept that I kind of wanted to show you guys a little bit. So if you guys are ready, let's go ahead and hop in and take a look at it. All right, so we got D4. We got knight to F6. We have C4, E6. We got knight C3, bishop B4. We have F3, C5. We have D5, and then we have castles by black. And we are in the Nimzo Indian. So for a lot of you guys that are very very familiar with openings, this is one of the famous ones as well, the Nimzo Indian. A lot of times people will say Grunfeld, Nimzo Indians, Najdorfs and Dragons and all that stuff. And so this is definitely up there with one of them. It's pretty sound. It's a little bit iffy for black to play, but it's definitely not lost by any means. So we have E4. We got B5 by black. And so this is it seems pretty interesting that you would be playing this B5 movement here. Because it does kind of seem like it's gambiting a little bit away. I didn't fully look at the variation, but I kind of feel like if you do take, black has the ability to, kind of break some stuff open. So it's probably not the best to take that pawn. And so we do see knight to H3. We have pawn takes C4, bishop takes C4. And then actually this early in the video, I'm going to have you guys go ahead and stop the video and see what black actually plays here. See if you can guess what black plays. I don't think it's something that just immediately comes to mind when you are playing a game. But like I said, if you want to go ahead and stop it and see what Wesley So actually played here, it's a kind of cute little move. Okay, cool. So the move is knight takes D5. Now, it might kind of seem like you can just take back with the pawn, but you definitely don't want to do that because that's going to just end up, kind of murdering you. So you definitely don't want that. So bishop takes is the proper continuation. But so if we back up and just kind of take a look at what pawn takes would look like, it just kind of seems like you're just winning an entire piece. But something that's important is that this knight move has cleared up the queen to get on this diagonal. So after pawn takes D5, you'd see queen to H4 with check. And then, just something possibly you might see knight to F2. And then after queen takes C4, you might see something like queen to C2. Pawn would take D5. And as you can see, D4 is going to be coming. And there's just not really a whole lot that you can really do. And also, your king is stuck in the center. And you are incapable of castling. So for those of you that are very familiar with the rules as far as castling goes, you know that this king cannot pass through this protected square by the queen. So the king doesn't have the ability to castle right now. So you just have way too many problems if you take with the pawn. So the bishop does take. So we see pawn takes D5, queen takes D5. We see knight to C6. We got bishop to E3, bishop to A6. And then, this bishop is serving the same purpose as the queen would have in the previous variation because it is protecting this square. So then that means, like I said, that the king cannot pass through this square on its way to castling. So if the white king did want to castle, he'd have to castle queenside, stepping over and then taking the rook over here. So we don't want to do that. The position is considerably too open on this queen side to really castle that way for white. So we don't want to, it's a little dangerous to do. So we see knight to f4. We got queen coming to h4 with check. We got g3, queen to f6, king to f2. And then we, at this point, have the novelty of the game, and that is bishop takes c3. One time there has been a game where knight to e5 was played. You know, so like I said, this is the first time that bishop takes c3. It's pretty clear. You know, after the pawn takes back, you know, you would imagine that the queen would just immediately take back. I'm not really sure what's fully wrong with that, but Wesley so didn't like that. So he does go rook a to b8. And then after rook a to d1, we see knight to e5 now. And then the bishop does take c5, rook to b2 with check. We see the rook blocking, and then we see knight coming here with check. And it's pretty nasty because, you know, of course, you can't really step. So what this knight has done, and it's now actually blocked the connection between the rook and the queen. So the problem is if you stepped anywhere, you know, this rook is going to just be taking this. And also if you stepped over here. So just to look at a couple different variations. Of course, if you stepped here, the rook would just be completely gone. If you stepped up this way, you know, this would be a situation like this, right? And then so you'd be having like some nice, you know, attacks down here. And then, of course, the deadliest one is if you step to the side, you would be having a discovered check by this bishop, and you'd be winning the queen next move. So we don't want to do any of that stuff. So we do take with the queen. Queen takes d3. So this is giving up the queen. So the bishop does take d3. And then after rook takes b2, you see queen taking c3. And then knight taking d3. And so after rook, queen takes d3, you have bishop back to e3. And so you see that you have a bishop against a rook, and you have two rooks against a queen, which isn't automatically losing. But it's considerably bad in this particular situation. A lot of the times what happens when you do sacrifice a queen, your pieces become very uncoordinated. So the problem is you have to start to reserve. You have to use moves to pull your pieces back. So this bishop needs to be pulled back. These rooks need to be connected. You know, you just really have to coordinate your pieces again. So a lot of times, even though you do, like sometimes when you do win a queen or you give up a queen, you know, your pieces are very uncoordinated. You have to get them back collected. So we see f5, you know, trying to break open the game as much as possible. And so we see rook to d2. We got queen to b5. We got e5. Just giving away the pawn, but making sure that we keep the position closed. We don't want it to open because we don't want this rook to become considerably better than it already is right now. So we see rook h to d1. So as you can see, white has kind of done, you know, what it's trying to accomplish, and, you know, bringing his pieces and stuff together. After a6, we do take on d7 with the rook. After rook to e8, we have to come back with the rook. You know, you could have did either one of the rooks. I think was legitimate. But we have f4, and then after bishop takes f4, queen to e2 with check. We got king to g1. Rook takes a2, and we see rook 3 to d2, queen to b3, king to g2. We got h6, rook to d8. Thinking it's time to trade off the rook. So after rook takes d8, we have rook takes d8 with check. King comes to f7. Rook to d7 with check. We have king to e8. And so we have the rook coming back down to d2. And as you can see, you know, white's doing their best at trying to coordinate their pieces. You know, they have this bishop, you know, nice and, you know, protected here. And so it's protecting the rook. So that's the best. If you ever do drop your queen, that's the best thing that you can try to do. Unless you already have a mating attack going, is to try to, you know, coordinate your pieces as much as possible. And make sure that they are all protected, because you don't want to be losing any more material than you already lost already. So we see a5, rook to e2 with check, king to f7. We have h4, we have a4. And so bishop to e5, we see a3. Rook to e4, we see a2. We see rook to e2. And so we see bishop, queen to b5. So rook comes to e1, queen takes e5, rook takes e5. And then now we get another queen again. So we just have a typical, not a typical, but we have like a basic, you know, king and rook versus king and queen endgame. So we see rook to e4. So we got queen to b2 with check, king to g1, queen to d2, rook to f4 with check, rook to e6, rook to e4 with check. We have king to d5. We have rook to e8. We have king to c4. Rook to e4 with check. We have king to d3, rook to e8, rook to c1 with check, and we had kind of just have some back and forth with the king and the queen here. So king to g2, queen to c2 with check, king down to g1, queen to b1 with check, king to g2, and we have queen to a2. And it's in this position that Teimour Radjabov actually resigns. And it's basically because when you have a king and a queen versus a king and a rook, at some point you're going to be able to force this king and this rook into the corner. So your whole goal when you have a queen against a rook, so a king and a queen versus a king and a rook, is to force the king and the rook to be in the corner of a board or on the side, the rim of a board, and basically force them apart. Because there's gonna come a certain point where the so let's just play like, you know, some just random moves and get kind of in the position that we want to get to. Of course, this is going to be checkmate down here, but I'm just trying to illustrate exactly what the situation is. Let's go, like, let's say we go here, whatever. Okay, so we're allowing the king and the the rook to get kind of. Let's do this. What are we doing? Okay, is it black's turn? Okay, black's turn. Okay, so we're getting over here. Okay, cool. Got this hooked up. Okay, got this hooked up. Okay, I guess we're not going there. Okay. Right. So, like, let's say just kind of like, for example, we have kind of like a position like this. At some point, you know, this rook and this king, they're going to have to be separated. And a lot of times how you're going to do that is you're going to triangulate your queen with a check, you know, coming down, something like that, and just kind of bringing the queen back to where it started, but just passing the move to white. It's a little complicated type of an endgame, but it's not something that's basic at all. So it's definitely not going to be something that you just see played, you know, well at, like, you know, like amateur tournaments or something like that. It's going to be something that you're going to encounter when you get like into higher levels of stuff. But like I said, I mean, the whole point is for you to try to separate this king and this rook. And then once you're able to do that, you're going to be able to pick up the rook, and it's just going to be a completely one-end game. And that pretty much is the way that you encounter all different types of end games when you have a piece and balance like that. When you have a king and a queen versus a king and a rook, a king and a knight, a king and a bishop, it's a lot easier with the bishop and the knight because it's not possible that you can hold those pieces together. The rook and the king are going to take the most knowledge. And so, but that's pretty much going to be your goal when you do have a queen and a king versus any other piece. You're going to be trying to get them in a position to separate, you know, themselves from, you know, each other. So that is that game. And like I said, that was round 5 and it was game 3. So I'll get on and I'll probably do another game or two after this one. But I appreciate you guys stopping by. Let me see. Let me get this again. Kak Sagol in Azerbaijani, Meriming Salamat. And the other part was Messiah Akong, Makati Kang Muli. Appreciate you guys very much for coming by, and I'll see you guys next time. All right.